So, back again for another tutorial. This time we're looking at some more advanced camera stabilization modes. So I'll go through them here, and if you like the HUD on the camera, then keep an eye out for that, because that's coming soon as well. So right at the moment, if you have a look, we are in RAW mode. This is just copying the exact transform and rotation from the controller, which is all what we know. So if I change it, what I've also added is tripod mode. So this doesn't take the location, but it does take the pan and tilt of the controller to the camera, much like a tripod would. We also have gimbal mode. So this doesn't smooth out the location, but it does smooth out the rotation and kills the roll, much like a real-life gimbal does. Then we have Steadicam mode. So this smooths out the location a little bit, as though you had a Steadicam with one of those arms. I forget the brand that makes them. And it also kills the roll and the tilt, like most Steadicams do. And so you've just got, like a real Steadicam, glide cam, whatever you want to call them. Lastly, we just have sort of a regular smoothing mode. This just smooths everything sort of identically like that, and then it goes back to the raw mode. And then the very last feature of this is it also has a freeze button, so I can just freeze the camera in place with the trigger, and so we can just operate it like the tripod, but without even the tilt and pan. And that works in any of the modes. So if I'm in tripod and I find a nice shot, I can just freeze it, so I don't have to worry about changing it by accident. Alrighty, we are in the basic project we set up from the very first tutorial. This is the third time I'm recording this. It can be applied to anything. The first time I did it, and then a gentleman by the name of Drew pointed out a nice and cleaner version of it, and then while doing that tutorial, I figured of an even better way of doing it, so I'm here for the third time. Let's do this. The way we were doing this before looked like this. We had a variable called smoothness, which we were setting. That was lerping between the the location of the controller and the current location of the camera, or in our case here, we were using the cube to do that, so we could have an offset on the camera, and then setting that. What we want to do instead is have a sort of a list we can flick through for each item, to say, hey, I want that sort of smoothness, I want that sort of smoothness, I want that sort of smoothness, or I don't want any smoothness at all. To do that, we're going to be using some functions and a macro, which sounds scary, but they are just a nicer and neater way of doing things. So, to do all this, what we are going to do is disconnect this, break link. We're going to start by creating a function, which we're going to call tripod, because that was our first method, tripod. And we are going to copy and paste in the event graph. We're going to copy and paste all of this into it, like so. Tripod, there we go. Like so. Now, what we also need to do is nothing. Right. Just like that, and then so what we're going to do is duplicate the tripod and have one for all the other smoothing methods we're using. So gimbal, Steadicam, duplicate Steadicam. We also had just basic smooth, and then we had raw. Duplicate raw. Like that. So we're going to come back to those in a minute. We can get deleted in our event graph. So we're in the event graph at the moment. Why won't it let me? There we go. So next what we need to do... Oh, I've gone too far over. Next what we need to do is sort out our system of choosing. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to drag each of the methods out. Smooth and raw. And line them up nice and neatly, that it is nice and pleasing to the eye, I guess. I'm going to put smooth there, like that, and like that. Alrighty, so next we are going to use the better camera changing, lens changing method to do this. So we need our smooth button, smooth camera. Yeah, action events. So the way this will work is instead of holding it down to smooth and letting it go to stop smoothing, it's just going to be a press. And so because of that, you can set it to a different button if that's, I know the Oculus's grip button is a bit soft, so if you want to set that to a different one, you can. So on that, we then need 3 variables. First, we need one variable called smoothness methods. That needs to be an array of strings. An array like that. Next, we want current smoothness method. That also needs to be a string, but it just needs to be a single variable, not an array of variables. And then lastly, we need an integer, which we will call smoothness index, like that. And that needs to be, yeah, like I said, an integer. And that's also a single variable. So what we want to do is we want to set the current smoothness method like that. And then we want to add a branch like that. And then we want to set the smoothness index if that is true. And then if it's false, plus we want an increment integer, integer. I want to say integer, but I think that's wrong. Next, what we need to do is we need to get the array and we need to get the index like that. So in the array, we need to get a copy. If you want a more in-depth explanation of how this works, go have a look at the lens changing method. We also want a last index, like so. We need a equals, like that, like that, and that. Alrighty, so the way this works is we have a list of all the smoothness methods we've just created here, so we have to add to that list, and the index, and then the current smoothness method. So the index will start at 0, so it'll get the first thing in this list and set it to that when we hit the button. Then it'll do this check, it'll say, is our current one the last one? If so, set it back to 0, and so that's how it loops back around. Or, if not, simply add 1 to the value and go to the next one. And so it'll keep doing that till it gets the last, and then it'll set it to 0 and it'll go back through again. To get that to work, we just have to compile it, and then when we look at our smoothness methods variable, we can add things to it now. And we just have to add all of these to it. So, raw, try smooth, oops. Smooth, tripod, gimbal, yeah, works. Steadicam, like so. Okay, so this is going to let us flick through them all. So now we need the macro that selects one of these from the event tick, because we can't just hook this up to all of them. And so the way we do that is with a couple of branches. Now we put that in a macro node just to make it look neater. I believe the difference between a function and a macro is a macro can have multiple of these out pins. So we're creating a macro and we'll call it smoothness changer. Like that. So we want one input, which will be the execution pin called input. And then again on the output, we just want all of our smoothness methods. So raw, smooth, I think I'd remember these by now. Tripod, come on, brain's thinking hard. Gimbal, Steadicam. Right, like so. Now we need as many branch nodes as there are as outputs. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So branch like that. Copy 1, 2, 3, 4 like that. And so we go input to output, and then false into next output. Come on. And we just keep doing that. False output. false into there, there, there. Alrighty. So lastly is what our conditions are. So we need to get our current smoothness method, which was a string, and we're just going to use a equals node, like so. So it'll say, hey, is that equal to what the current one is? Yes, do that. Otherwise, go to the next. And we also need 4. We need this number, same number of these. So 4 in this case, and I'll hook them all up like so. Let's plug that into there. Plug these into here, 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 and here. Like so, and then just simply type them exactly as they appear in, you've written them down here in the smoothness methods array. Smooth, tripod, gimbal, and Steadicam. Alrighty, lastly, do not hook anything to this false. You might be tempted to hook it at the start so it goes back through, but you will find that Unreal will refuse to open because that's an infinite loop. It does not like infinite loops. Also make sure things are spelled correctly. Steadicam, like so. So all we have to do is drag our macro into here, plug the input into the input, and then these into each of the outputs. Nice and easy.